This time around, let's build a wooden katana. And I started, as I often do, by breaking down some boards, and I wanted to try laminating different colored wood again. I've done that in the past on the Gladius build, but this time I cut the outer layers thinner than I had done before, really thin, I think just about 1/8 of an inch. And I did a couple different woods just to see how they would look. So I've got some hickory, yutoba, a little bit of walnut, and at the end of the video I'll show a couple of those variations. So just gluing those up, spread some glue and then clamp them all together and let them dry overnight. After pulling them apart, I'd created a template for the blade and then just trace that so I can cut it out roughly on the bandsaw, and then I'll come back and clean that up with a template router. So this one has hickory in the center, and then the outside is this really nicely figured yutoba wood. The figure doesn't show up as much until you finish it, but it's a pretty lovely combination. So with that done, I could go back, get my template, and template route this. And I found that especially near the tip, it's a little bit unsupported, and you still have a risk of tear out, chip out. And the hickory itself, I couldn't tell what grain direction it was going, but you risk a little bit of tear out on that as well. But it was pretty clean. There was one little area that I wish hadn't sort of taken as big a chip out of it as it did, but mostly it was pretty good. So with the blade form done, I turned to the guard, which I think is called the tsuba, and laminated a few pieces for that as well. And then I just drew a design, something I liked, took it, roughly cut it out, and used some spray adhesive to stick it to that lamination, and then I'll go cut that out on the scroll saw. Of course, to cut those inner shapes, I need to drill holes so I can get the scroll saw inside there. I started out cutting the outside and just running it along, and then about halfway through this I realized that I should cut all the inside shapes because you just have more control, still having that leverage, still having the rest of that bar there, rather than trying to just hold that smaller piece. So cutting all the inner pieces, I should have drilled a hole for the center as well where it will fit onto the blade, but I just took the blade, made sure that I was cutting something pretty close, and then cut this out as well. Just clean up the corners a little bit, and then a quick test fit to see how well that will work. Actually, just kidding. Cutting the outside. So it was pretty close. It almost fit. It's just a little bit of cleanup, and it should fit well. And when you use spray adhesive, once you're done cutting, pull that off and it'll come off pretty easily. If you leave it on for a couple hours or overnight, it will stick a lot worse, and it's hard to get off. So I've heard. I've never done that myself, but I've heard that. So one of the reasons I wanted to do the lamination is because on a katana blade you have this potentially wavy line called a hamon, which is a tempering line, I think. And I wanted to see if I could simulate that in wood. So I have a cove, a roundover bit, and so you can see, so this is at real speed, how I'm sort of just running it in and out and giving it a bit of variation in what material is cut away. And when you turn it over, you can see there's this sort of serrated or undulating edge that is created. I wasn't sure how well it would work, but after experimenting a little bit, I was really happy with the way it looks. I think it looks pretty sweet. So I got to do the other side and sort of just do this in a couple passes. Do a little bit, turn it over, see if there's areas that need some more, then focus on those. And then you get this really cool simulated hamon line. For the handle, I found I wanted to use some wood that didn't have a lot of grain to it, so I have some beech, and I ripped it down to the size I needed, and then I'm going to route a channel down the center of it to fit for the tang. Now, I made a mistake here. This part went fine, but to match this up exactly, you'd want to route the other half of this channel coming in from the other direction. Now, of course, because the router bit spins in a certain way, in this case counterclockwise, feeding it in from the right pushes it against the fence and you're okay. Feeding it in from the left is going to push it away from the fence. I knew that. I knew this was potentially going to cause problems, but I was just gonna see if it's a shallow cut, if I could just hold it against the fence and make it work anyway. You see it doesn't work, and tore out the top, and I should know that happened. I've made that mistake before. So instead, I cut the handle a little bit wider and then just ran both from the right so that they would hold them against the fence, and created the chamfer that way. And then and they didn't line up perfectly because of that, but that's okay, because I had enough, like I said, I cut it a little wider, and I had enough room to spare and go back later and cut that whole handle, a little bit down, which I'll show. So just leaving tape as a mark, and then, sorry, the camera cut out, and I didn't realize, but you can see that both of those were cut, and then I just come in with a small handsaw and cut the angle. I put these angles into the blades I make because it strengthens that transition right there. I tend to think of that as the weakest point, potentially, right where the tang and the blade meet, and if you left that at a straight 90-degree angle, then that creates a weaker transition point. So I like to put an angle there. Now here I'm just taping the handle so that I can glue up around it and then it won't stick. And this does work fine. I've used tape to do this before, and the wood glue won't stick to it. But in this case, I didn't need to tape it. The glue hadn't set. I mean, I could just use it, clamp the handle, and the glue isn't going to set before you can pull the sword blade back out and then just let it dry all the way. So tape isn't necessary particularly. But it is good to glue it up right around that blade so that it lines up and you can get it right there. And then I didn't show it, but I removed the blade. So now this is dried off, and you can see there's just a little bit of an overlap, again because those didn't line up perfectly from the routing exercise, but easy to trim those up and no problem. And then I used a really decent size round over bit. And creates a really nice, comfortable handle. And right above the guard, there's I don't remember what it's called, but a small area that transitions from the guard to the blade. And so I'm just using a couple of thin pieces of wood here, of beech. Let those glue, make sure that it's in the right position while it's still, the glue's still not set. And then a couple thin pieces come in and just put those inside. And it's a little bit, the pieces are a little bit proud, they extend a little bit past, and then we'll just clean that up once that glue's in. I thought I might have to use little pieces of wood to help clamp it in, but it was held in there tight enough that I didn't need any clamping. And then just run it over to the bandsaw or scroll saw and clean up that edge. I did actually try to use a flush trim bit on the router table, but those pieces are so small that it chipped one out. So the bandsaw or scroll saw is definitely a better option. Now this was another experiment. I wasn't sure how well this would work, but I wanted to simulate on the handle the silk wrap that you often see. And again, but do this all in wood. So I created this pattern, and the double line there represents what I'm going to be using is a template guide on a handheld router. So it's offset a little bit from what the actual size is going to be, which is that inner diamond. So just had to go through, cut all these out. Now the idea is that I'm going to stain this handle really dark, and then I'll use that router template to route in a very shallow, those shallow diamonds, and that will bring back the lightness of the wood. So this is just a dark walnut stain, again on this beech wood, and I did 2 coats of this, got it really nice and dark, and then use some double stick tape, clamp it down, and then again this router has a little template guide, and you can see that it's sort of just a little collar that attaches to the router, and then the actual cutting bit extends through, and I'm extending it just barely through because I want to cut just a very shallow cut. So now I can just follow that pattern and make each cut. Make sure I cut out all of the inside as well. And you can see that the tape, the double-sided tape, isn't holding exactly, but it was plenty enough. There's a little bit of variation, but that didn't make much difference. I actually was really happy with the way it came out. I made sure and line it up with the top so that both sides have the same pattern in the same area. And again, you can see here that there is a little bit of variation, but it also moves the handle a little bit. So again, it just works. It's hard to clamp that handle because that end is rounded off on the bottom side of it. So the clamping wasn't very good, but as long as it kept it in position, that's all I needed. So that handle is done. Time for glue up. Just a little bit of glue, put the tsuba on, and then make sure I have a good amount of glue inside the handle. And clean up any squeeze out, and then just let this dry. I finished it with 2 coats of shellac. I had shellac in this bottle that's thinned with a bit of mineral spirits. But you can see that with that shellac, that grain pops, that contrasting color pops. This is what I love about working with wood and building objects and these swords and different things out of wood is when you get these different colors going on, just the natural colors. I just love it. It just speaks to me. It's one of the reasons why I love leaving the natural color of the wood as the final finish. So here's a few of the other blades that were created. This one had a walnut with a hickory core. This one had a Yotoba core and hickory and a straight hamon. This one was also Yotoba on the center, but with that varied or jagged hamon edge. This one, it just looks pretty cool. The edge looks pretty vicious. So, couple pics of the final katana. I don't know, which one's your favorite? Which one do you like? You can leave your thoughts in the comments, and thanks for watching.